Hey everybody, welcome to DadsDen of Pop Culture. Today we're going to talk about a TV movie that came out in 1994 that is loosely connected to D-Day, the invasion of Normandy. And today, the day I'm actually posting this, is the anniversary of those landings. And obviously a day of celebration because they were sort of another nail in the coffin of the Third Reich. But this TV movie is an alternate history, and it asks the question, what would have happened had the D-Day invasions failed? That's what it's all about here. The TV movie is directed by Christopher Meynell, British director. He directed some episodes of The Sweeney, a lot of TV. The guy did a lot of TV. He was a veteran. Written by Stanley Weiser, who was writer on Wall Street, and Ron Hutchinson. Cinematography by Peter Sova, who did Good Morning Vietnam. So we got some industry pros in here doing this. Now, the movie is based on the 1992 novel by Robert Harris called Fatherland. And of course, that's the name of our film as well. Now, there are differences between the book and the movie. And in fact, the author didn't really care for those changes, didn't really like the movie. Now, I've seen the movie and I've read the book, and I like both of them very much. And I think the movie holds up on its own, although I understand why an author wouldn't like to see those changes being made. But we're going to focus in this video on the TV movie specifically. We're going to talk about it the way we normally do in these things. So let's begin. So we see here an image of the Normandy invasion, and that's how our TV movie begins. It gives you sort of a recap of the alternate history. The movie is set in an alternate 1964. So this is all part of the past. So as I said, the invasion fails. The United States has to retreat. It ultimately abandons Europe to the Third Reich, focuses instead on defeating Japan, which it does. Eisenhower is humiliated, does not become president of the United States. Churchill and the royal family go into exile in Canada. So the Third Reich in Europe is triumphant. It takes the whole Megillah. And as a result, we get this new triumphal Berlin. This is the architecture designed by Albert Speer. Things that they wanted to do after their victory. Well, in this case, they actually get to do it. The SS becomes a peacetime police force in this alternate history. And Germany goes through the 1950s as a seemingly peaceful, seemingly civilized place, but it's very tightly controlled in terms of news, in terms of what gets out, and it's locked in a Cold War with the United States. So there's no movement between the two countries. In the 1960s, the war with the Soviet Union in the East is still going on, and it's becoming very costly for the Third Reich. They decide they need a formal peace with the United States. They need to finally officially end World War II. Well, in 1960, Joseph Kennedy Sr. is elected president of the United States, and Hitler believes that with him he can strike a deal. So, in 1964, on the eve of Hitler's 75th birthday, so of course a big celebration in Germany for that event, Germany is opening its borders to American reporters, and they've invited the President of the United States to a summit where they hope that they can get America's aid in fighting the remnants of the Soviet Union. But they end with this. There are rumors that something terrible happened in Germany during the war, something that is never spoken of. Now, from the standpoint of a crime mystery film, which ostensibly this is kind of a tell. But we're talking about real world historical events. And certainly in 1994, most people would have understood what all of this meant. They would understand what was underlying this film. So think of it in a way as a Columbo mystery, where you know who did it. You're watching Columbo track it down. Okay, here we kind of know what the secret is. We're watching people track it down, and we're getting a glimpse of what a Third Reich would have looked like in the 1960s and what these people's lives were like, etc. Okay, so, but it's a good recap. Catches everybody up. As I said, the book differs, but I think with the movie, they made some changes that would be helpful for people who were not real World War II history buffs. They stick to big events. For example, the SS is not the big police force in the book. It's something else. But I think for most people who, again, weren't real big buffs on World War II, you know, they know what they know about it from movies, from TV shows. They've heard of the SS. They've heard of the Gestapo. They know about the U-boats, etc. So they stuck to things that people would know. Probably a good idea. All right. So now in the present day, which in this case is 1964, we see a man jogging in a park. And we start to see the credits rolling. Rutger Hauer is going to be playing our detective, our hero in this film, as will Miranda Richardson, who plays an American reporter, here to cover the big event. And then we get the title. This is in German, Fatherland. Fatherland is obviously the actual title for the English speakers. So, as our jogger's jogging, he sees something in the distance. He sees these three men over by the shores of maybe a lake, maybe a pond, call it what you will. And they're doing something. He doesn't know what. But when he sees them, he sort of stops and he kind of runs away. All right, so we already have a hint to what things are like here in the Third Reich. And something we would expect. You got to be careful. You don't want to be tied to things that are maybe a little, criminal. You also don't want to stumble in on the authorities doing something a little criminal. Better to be safe than sorry. So the men get in a car and drive away, and the jogger ducks behind a tree so they don't see him. But he sees sight of this man, and the sight of him absolutely terrifies this kid. The runner then runs over to where the men had been, and he finds a dead body floating in the river. I will make a note here. In the version that I watched, and it may have been edited for television elsewhere, there is some nudity. It is not lascivious or titillating nudity at all. The body, for example, floating in the lake is naked. You see his butt. That's about it. There are a couple other scenes like that. So just be aware if you're watching this that does occur. But again, it's not done in a sort of, enticing way by any means. And I wondered if some of that has to do with the subject matter of what our two heroes are going to find. If you know what I'm talking about, you probably do. So we next meet Xavier March, played by Rutger Hauer, getting a call early in the morning to investigate the scene of the crime. It's a Sunday. He wasn't supposed to be into work today. He's not very happy about this. Gets out of bed. He goes to the window, and we get this sort of panoramic view of 1964 Berlin, capital of the Third Reich. And there we see that giant dome that Albert Speer had designed for Germany after its victory. And we hear the radio playing, And they're talking about the war in the East against the Russians. And of course, according to that, Germany is doing just fine. They're beating them. They'll have victory soon. Now, you have to think, even people in a 1964 Third Reich, it's been 20 years and you ain't beat them yet. So even they would have to be maybe a little bit suspicious of that news. But, that's like life in a totalitarian dictatorship. You don't ask a lot of questions. You don't talk a lot. So we see him then cooking breakfast for himself and for his son, who's sitting at the table there, looking at a magazine. In fact, it is a Look magazine, an American magazine, probably something that has just recently been allowed into Germany. And there's going to be a scene later where the boy's looking through it and sees something that he finds rather odd. We'll talk about that when we get more to that scene. And so what you're getting through this whole scene is a look at Xavier March. Now, we're going to see him at a certain point in his SS uniform because he's a police officer. And we're used to seeing people in an SS uniform and thinking they're monsters. They were monsters. But this guy's not a monster. So we're getting this idea of a weird sense of normalcy, but with this underlying abnormality, this weirdness, this terrible, terrible place. It's interesting, but I think it's designed to sort of give you an insight into, well, again, life in a totalitarian state, that, there are normal people in such a place and they try to live normal lives the best they can. You have to get up, you have to go to work, you eat breakfast, etc. So it's not all weirdness all day long, but it's that, it's there, John Banner, who played Sergeant Schultz on Hogan's Heroes, had once said he was questioned about playing, as somebody I think at the time had put it, playing a Nazi. And he said, well, first of all, Schultz is not a Nazi. And he wasn't. He was German. Not every German was a member of that party or agreed with that party or even liked that party. Schultz was drafted into the war effort. And he said, look, anytime, at any place, there are going to be good people, even in a place as terrible as the Third Reich. That's what you want to get from Xavier March. So when they sit down to eat, and here we're going to get one of those scenes that's going to show us, the kind of weirdness of this 60s Third Reich, at least to our eyes. And we're also going to get another insight into March's character. The little boy sits down to eat with his father, but first he gets up to say grace, which in this case goes something like, Führer, my Führer, bequeathed to me by the Lord, etc., etc., etc. And March is watching this, and he goes, do you remember when we used to say grace? When, I was still with your mother? And the boy doesn't. He goes, well, I'll help you. And so the little boy does this, and March leads him through a saying of Christian grace. So it's a nice, simple scene, but it does pack a lot into it. We get an insight into who this man is. So that over with, puts on his uniform, and he starts going to work. And we do see him, before he gets into his car, walking past this big poster for Die Beatles. Okay, so again, it's an alternate 60s, but not everything is completely different, although one wonders what kind of songs they would have been singing. So he gets into his car, and you can clearly see the emblem of the SS on there. And he heads to the crime scene, not just his office at this point. So he gets to the crime scene, and we don't learn much here. The doctor says, well, I'm going to have to do an autopsy, etc. So March notes that the crime appears to have occurred right in view of a very large, very grand house. Maybe that's important. We are next brought to the airport where the American reporters have arrived. And they get on a tour bus and they're driving into Germany. And there's a tour guide there telling them all about the wonders of Germany. And this is where we're going to be meeting our other hero of the story. And that is the woman there, played by Miranda Richardson. Her name is Charlie McGuire. Now, a little small talk here with the guy next to her, Walter Elliott. He covered Berlin for CBS before the war. Didn't think he'd ever get back. McGuire was born in Berlin, a German mother and American father, but left long before the war had started. Her father was Paul McGuire, a diplomat. Okay, so we get a little bit of their history there. And we overhear the guide at one point saying, "We have nothing to hide, and we have many accomplishments we wish to share with the outside world." We have nothing to hide. And we get this shot of them driving again towards that dome. 1994, so we're talking about a matte painting. It's pretty well done, though. You don't obviously get a lot of special effects in this because you don't need it. But what they do pretty well. And so the guide continues with, "We want you to know how sincere we are in wanting to bring the Cold War to a close. And isn't that what everyone wants?" With a great big smile. Okay. So we now get a scene with March getting back to headquarters. He meets his partner who did not show up. He was staying up late with his sick son. March is understanding. Okay, again, we're learning about the character. Another officer, part of the sort of vice squad, I guess you could say, shows up. There are people being led by. He says it was a pure Aryan woman caught in the act with a Polish man. Resettlement for her, 10 years hard labor for him. So, again, we're reminded of where we are, that it's not like it's a kinder, gentler version of this place. What Adolf Hitler wanted, Adolf Hitler got. And that's what they live in. But again, you also see what looks like a sort of normal police station. So it's that sort of dichotomy. McGuire, meanwhile, is taking photographs in Berlin while she's chatting with Elliot. But they're interrupted by the tour guide. "I'm sorry, you need a permit to take any photos." So again, they got things tied down real tight. And they're at this point outside their hotel. So as she walks away so they can go check in, we see a man behind a window who's watching her. Is he like Gestapo or something like that? Well, we'll find out. So Charlie goes and checks in. As she's walking away from the counter, that man approaches her, hands her a manila envelope saying, "Miss McGuire, I think you dropped this." "No, I didn't." He goes, "I think you did." Quickly walks away. Ooh, something is afoot. So now we see the autopsy. Doctor says, well, it could have been a drowning, but he had a massive coronary. There's extensive bruising on the upper part of the body. He must have struggled to get out of the water. Probably was in the water less than 2 hours. Okay, interesting. So it looks like it may, in fact, be a murder. Probably not a suicide. Probably not an accident, although I guess a guy could be skinny dipping. I don't know. Would you do that in the Third Reich? I have no idea. So they do a fingerprint check, and it reveals his identity. He is Joseph Buehler, architect of the Jewish resettlement program. He admitted to excesses in the work camps during the war. In the 1950s, he introduced reforms to the system. He's a close friend of Hitler from the 1920s. Forced into retirement in 1961 after accusations of improper use of state property. So we got a party bigwig here who has either killed himself, been murdered. Okay. Either way, March's partner is not real thrilled with something like this. It's going to be kind of hot to handle, and it's going to mean a lot of paperwork. And again, you're saying it just kind of reminds you of a normal police station, and then, but look, the uniforms they're wearing. Look at the things they're talking about. Meanwhile, Charlie McGuire is finally in her hotel room. She pulls a photo out of the envelope, a picture of several men, one circled, with an address she is meant to visit. And on the back we see, please go to this address and ask Herr Stuckert where it all began. Signed, Franz Luther. Okay. So the mystery deepens. March arrives at Buehler's home to do some investigation. He sees there's a half-consumed glass of wine. Okay, that doesn't seem like, seems like maybe he was interrupted. The man had a false leg. It is in the closet. Obviously, he would have noted that the man only had one leg. but again, in the closet. And then the phone rings, and March rushes to answer. The voice on the other end asks, Bueller? And I'm not going to do the Ferris Bueller joke here. March responds, yes. There's a pause, and the man hangs up the phone. And we see the man, and we look, and it looks like the man who handed the envelope to Charlie in the hotel. So next, March visits the SS Training Academy, so the police academy, basically. The runner who found the body is a cadet there, and his father apparently was a founder of the SS. They kind of chat back and forth, and it's a nice scene because you can see the way Rutger Hauer plays the character. He's very cool, kind of slow, kind of methodical. He tells the boy that he couldn't have seen the body floating from where he says he did, so he knows that he's not telling the whole truth. And he wants to know, what did you really see? And he says, a car, 3 men, nothing else, nothing. Then what are you afraid of? Did you recognize someone? It was the general in command of the Gestapo. Okay, that's big. So March warns him, keep this secret. Don't say any more. All right? Love the way he plays this scene. It's really, really well done. Charlie heads for the address on the envelope and is followed by another car. It is the man who passed her the envelope, so he's keeping track of her. She arrives, presses the button, for Stuckert's apartment, and waits. She notices some prisoners doing some road construction work. Remember the taught line about hard labor? There's no answer, so she rings the concierge. I want to say here, the art direction is just really good in recreating not only 1964, and it, I'm not an expert, but it looks really good to me. It doesn't look like they're doing a lazy, this is sort of 60s. It looks like they really got the period right. But also, of course, it's an alternate 1964. So they did a nice job with all that. So finally, the door opens, and the man who greets her does not really look like a concierge. Heil, you-know-who. She's kind of like, yeah, I'm here to see Herr Stuckert. He allows her entry. There's a brief, very tense conversation, and he finally directs her to Stuckert's apartment. Now, again, if you know your stuff, you see the leather jacket, you kind of know who you're dealing with here. So she gets up there, knocks, etc., rings the bell. Nobody's answering. She enters. Room has a more opulent interior than it looks like it should have for the exterior, the hallways of this apartment building. She sees this photograph of Stuckert with Hitler, and hey, there's the man that we've been seeing. Of course, she still doesn't know exactly who he is, but now she knows that he has to be somebody somewhat important. And so she's poking around, and then she enters the bedroom, and that's where she discovers this man, well, presumably anyways, dead on the bed, a woman next to him. They've both been shot. They're actually both nude as well. That's another place where you see a glimpse of nudity, but again, it's not done in a lascivious way. So she next finds herself escorted to SS headquarters for questioning, and she's in an interrogation room with a woman who's not very talkative. That woman is replaced by another woman who is equally non-talkative. And you notice she has this newspaper here. I translated it with Google Translate, so if it's wrong, blame it on Google. It says Hitler meets J. Kennedy. The German Reich is once again writing world history. Charlie seems a little bit shocked at the headline. Okay, so we're going to now bring up the spoiler alert because we're going to get into more spoilery territory here. So while this is going on with her, March is ushered into a meeting with SS Oberst Gruppenführer, in other words, General, more or less, Arthur Nebbe, played by the great Peter Vaughn. And he makes an incredible admission during this. We need the Americans. We need to end this Cold War. We need their help to end the war in the East. This surprises March, who's always been told the opposite. So, okay, maybe there's a little flaw in March. Maybe he believes some of what he's told, and maybe some things he doesn't, but okay. And there's some small talk, and then he informs March that the Bueller case has been designated a state security matter. That means it's no longer his case. It is the Gestapo's. Time to get out of it. March responds by telling about the sighting of General Globus of the Gestapo at the crime scene. This piques Neba's curiosity. There's always a little bit of that kind of, infighting, one-upmanship kind of going on within a regime. And so he brings up the Stuttgart case, which is not yet handled by the Gestapo, and says, why don't you dig into that? See if there's a connection with the deaths. He's directed to go speak with the American reporter who found the bodies, find out what Globus is up to. Nothing in writing. Report to me directly. So now we have the connection between our two main characters. We get a brief questioning, and then he removes her from the interrogation room. And we next see them in a car. Now, there's something important in this scene, because they're talking a little bit about history and about politics. We learn that March served on a U-boat during the war, and that's going to be important. And so once they arrive, he tells his driver there, go pick up the boy from the SS Academy. Put him in protective custody. Okay. So then the two of them get out. They go up to the apartment. They ring. The actual concierge lets them in. And she does say, that's not the guy that I saw earlier. Okay. And then they go up to investigate the apartment. While they're doing that, the concierge is calling the Gestapo to inform on them, because we are in the Third Reich, and informing is what happens in evil totalitarian societies. So while they speak, they hear a car roar up, and March takes a look outside and says, we have to get out. So he guides her carefully and deliberately, the way he does everything, puts her on the freight elevator to escape, tells her to mind her own business, and then he returns to the room. And we get this confrontation between him and the Gestapo men. March knows, if nothing else, he needs to delay them, but again, plays it very cool, very calm. And, but you get the tension underlying it. Rutger Hauer is a very good actor. And it shows here. The Gestapo wants to know where the American woman is. Why was she brought here? March kind of ignores his questions. Does let him know, though, that he is double parked and he might get a ticket. So he might want to move that car. And then he calmly leaves the scene. But while he's doing that, Neba is having his own meeting with Globus, the head of the Gestapo. Not a nice place to be. The next morning, Neba and March meet at Bueller's mansion. Apparently there's something they missed in their search that the Gestapo found. A room full of art treasures. So there's this whole story about Bueller was involved, and Stuttgart as well, in a big art smuggling thing. Well, we know that the Germans did do a bit of that during World War II. I mean, a lot of places do that during wars. So the Gestapo was closing in. That's why the one man apparently killed himself. March doesn't believe that that's the case. But the point is, this is now in the hands of the Gestapo under direct orders of Reich Minister Heydrich himself. So that's that. March offers up, though. He goes, I found Bueller's prosthetic leg in the closet. If he was going to go drown himself in the river, why would he hop down there on one leg? Okay. Leave this alone. That's what Neba tells him. He says, March, you cannot afford to make an enemy of Globus or of me. And March ends it with, yes, sir. So his curiosity's piqued. He knows something's going on, but he's not stupid. Okay. We next see him and his son at a big fair, a carnival, probably because of the big birthday celebration going on. And once again, you see it looks like a very normal sort of happy place. Okay, maybe not what you would expect. But it leads to a scene where you get a couple different things. The boy's looking in the magazine and he sees a little boy on crutches. And he says, isn't it cruel, that they don't euthanize children like that. And March is like, where did you hear that? Well, my teachers, mom. And so he tells him this little story about somebody who has a seeming disability that leads to him being an angel. Okay, it's a cute little story, but he's trying to get through to his son that this is not something that should be done. So clearly March is not on board with the Third Reich and their teachings. But then we also see the little boy looking at this watch. And the watch was given to March by Admiral Dönitz, the German Navy, after the war, sort of a medal, sort of an award. Well, not a medal, but an award for a merit, what have you. And on the back of it is engraved JC. And the boy says, well, who's JC? And he goes, I don't know. Okay, now again, if you know your history, you get an idea of what this actually is. But it's kind of a heavy scene, and it's handled very, very well, very deftly. So coming into work the next morning, he lets his partner know, release the young cadet. The case is closed. His partner says, well, that's just as well, because the cadet is dead. When? Last night. How? He fell in the gym and broke his neck. No witnesses, no witnesses. The instructor said he loved gymnastics. Now, when March was initially questioning the boy, talking with him, he found out that that was not the case. So he knows something bad has happened, and he orders an autopsy. And in the doctor's opinion, the death was caused by the inhalation of blood into the lungs. So, okay, I mean, it could be. But March isn't really listening because he knows how the boy died. So then we get this snippet of Charlie watching a news program. She's watching an interview between Walter Elliott and the, I guess he's either the American ambassador or he's an aide to Joseph Kennedy Sr., one of the two. That's going to be important later on. The phone call comes from Reich Tourism. Arrangements for a sightseeing trip, etc. She's confused because there were no such arrangements. And then she realizes she's speaking to March. And he lets her know, that he wants to meet at a park. Okay. So she's going to meet him the next day. Well, the next day comes, and she heads out, and she notices that somebody is following her. So we get this tense scene of her walking to the park with somebody behind her. And this is a nice scene on an escalator. But the way it's shot, it gives you that feeling of being closed in, of being pursued. But when she gets to the park, it turns out it was just a guy who was headed to the park as well. He greets somebody, etc. Okay, nothing to worry about, not being followed. But then we see that blurry man in the background who's watching her. And that blurry man, when he's in focus, is the man who gave her that envelope. And he then backs away when he sees that she's meeting March. So March has a proposition for Charlie. He's going to give her back her passport in exchange for her little secret. You've stumbled into something quite delicate. You don't know this country. Well, she knows there's a story here, and she wants to track it down. Her proposition to him is, I give you my lead, and we follow it together. Okay, he agrees. So he gives her the passport. She passes him the photograph and tells him where she got it. And he remarks, these people mean nothing to him. Now, this is in itself meaningful because these are high party officials during the war. People that the average German, being taught German history, maybe should know, maybe should recognize, but he doesn't recognize them. Well, the place in the picture is Wannsee, which is now a house of the blind, and they both visit it. And again, if you know your history, you should know what's important about that place. Well, March learns a couple things here. One of them, that the death toll on the Eastern Front now against the Russians is even worse than during World War II. Okay, so they're losing a lot of soldiers. Reinforces what Neba told him. He and Charlie also learned that this building during the war was the headquarters of Reichsmarschall Heydrich himself. Well, what he did there, of course, is very top secret. It's unknown to the current director, but that's where it was. So his next visit is to the Reich Archive, 50 million files on party history, where Xavi, as this woman calls him, that's obviously his nickname, knows him. She's one of the archivists. Her name is Anna. He shows her the photo and asks, well, when was this likely taken? She guesses late 41, early 42, before the really big raids began. So they go and look into the files. They find a letter from Heydrich delaying a meeting and sent to a bunch of the big names in that photo. And many of these people have died recently under mysterious circumstances. Having pulled that information, Anna wants nothing more to do with it. You can see she's very worried there, and we also will see somebody watching her. Okay, once again, there are eyes everywhere, and everybody in a totalitarian state is potentially an informer. So back in the car, March tells Charlie, get out of Berlin tonight. He doesn't like this. It goes to the highest levels of the government, to Heydrich himself. Everyone in the photograph has been murdered except Franz Luther. You got to get out of here. So it's a very smart move. And in a very surprising move, Charlie actually agrees. She begins packing a suitcase. But while she's doing it, she's interrupted by a delivery of flowers and a note directing her to Humboldt-Taine Station by Luther. Okay. At the station, Luther's waiting. He sees police strolling around, checking people. So he boards the train to avoid them, and he's successful. And it's there that he sees Charlie, who's on the train as well. Okay. But he is spotted by somebody, and all points, alert is put out, and we even see March, getting the alert, getting in his car, heading towards the station. Okay. But he has a moment now to speak with Charlie. He wants to defect. She will arrange this through the American embassy. Why should she do this? He has a story that will make her famous. The biggest secret of the war. Thousands have been killed to protect it. A terrible crime was committed. He has proof. Nothing will be the same again. Not for you, not for anybody. Well, she's a reporter, and that certainly gets her attention. So getting where they're going, he gets off. March and the other SS arrive at the station, and they spot Luther. He pulls a gun and is ultimately shot by the SS. March witnesses this, and then he sees Charlie on the scene, so he quickly gets her out of there. Okay. So back in his car, what are we going to do? Well, he's going to arrest her. He thinks that she's going to be more protected in the hands of the SS than if the Gestapo get him. Okay. Well, she calls bullshit on this. She's like, you're only doing this because you're afraid they're going to kill you. She lets him know that Luther told her that they had killed thousands to keep whatever this secret is a secret, which means if we don't figure this out, we're as good as dead. Okay. So we better do something. And she shows him the photos of Luther and this mystery woman. These are the two people he wanted to get papers for to get out. Is it his wife? Well, we see them visit Luther's house. I mean, they're in a car observing, where they see his wife being arrested, and that ain't her. Okay, so who is this woman? Well, we next see, again in the category of informers, Anna has gone to the Gestapo to rat out March and hopefully save her own skin. It does not go well for her. They know it for past associations, etc. You can see how nervous she gets at the sound of all of that. So at this point in the film, we're starting to shift from March and Charlie pursuing a story to March and Charlie being pursued. The hunters are now the hunted, and things are going to start closing in. We also see the Gestapo questioning March's partner, not very gently. March, meanwhile, gets the information he needs about that mystery woman. Her name is Anna von Hagen, an actress. She is Luther's mistress. He gets this by blackmailing that head of the vice squad who has been stealing some of the evidence. So they now know where they need to go because she has the evidence. This might be the best sequence of the film. Anna, meets Charlie at the door. She's expecting an American, because she's going to provide the papers, and says, yeah, you're supposed to give me the evidence. Okay. She's a little suspicious at first, but eventually Charlie gets the papers. And there are some absolutely devastating lines in here. Because as they're talking, Anna, played by Jean Marsh, and she just this chilling sort of accent in her delivery. She says, you still have Jews in America, don't you? She goes, well, now that you have a new president who thinks more like the Fuhrer, maybe you won't for long. And Charlie's kind of like, huh? Like, oh, we're going to resettle them somewhere? And she's like, oh, yeah, resettle them. And she, I guess I should use one, she kind of points up. Resettled them to the air. You got to watch this scene. It's incredible. This is where, look, obviously all the evidence would be in this folder. It's not going to be interesting in a film to have them looking through a folder of pictures and things like that. So this sort of sums it up in her little speech. It's absolutely chilling. I mean, just the evil of this woman, because she was all for what was done. You got to watch it. If you don't watch anything else in this film, like fast forward to this scene and just watch. It's a hell of a performance. I think it's maybe my favorite performance of the film. And honestly, Rutger Hauer, Peter Vaughn, Miranda Richardson, they're all good in it. I mean, the acting is excellent in the film by and large. But this really, really stands out. But when Charlie emerges, she is very shaken. In fact, she sort of runs from March and he kind of follows in his car and they go to this little park and she sits on this bench. He walks over and she's going through this evidence. There are photos of the death camps, things of that nature. And she starts telling him what she's seeing and he can't believe it. Well, the photos must be forgeries. Charlie, they're not forgeries. These are real. Well, do you want this to be true? Do you think it's a good story? So he's going through this sort of denial, sort of anger. You get the idea. She's the whole time going, what does final solution mean? He's like, I don't know. And this is where it is important that he was serving on a U-boat during the war. He was not actually in Germany at the time. So there's a lot of things that he might not have seen. He says, after the war, I believed what everyone else believed. No reason not to. I am a loyal son of the fatherland. How do I explain this to my son? We killed an entire people. So he's absolutely stunned about this. And he also kind of figures out where that watch came from. It's a personal effect taken from a Jewish person who they had killed in a death camp. Because in reality, those things were taken and they were passed around and given out to people. So what now? He asked her, I'm sorry, if your government knew, would Kennedy still meet with Hitler? Well, she doesn't know, but she doesn't think so. He says, we have to get the documents to the ambassador, and then we have to get out. And she's saying, you've got to come with me, Xavi. I can't. This is my country. She goes, no, not anymore. This isn't your country. She's right. It's not the place that he thought he was. Now, granted, the place he thought he was wasn't that great to begin with, but it wasn't as heavy as that. He says, I can't leave my son. Well, then we'll bring him with us. Okay. But here's a major complication. They're hunted. They're running out of time. He wants to go get his son. Okay. We head now into the final portion of the film. So they're going to meet later in this park where they're going to make their getaway. But for now, She goes to the big rally because she knows Walter Elliott's going to be there at some point. The ambassador and the president are going to be there. So this is the place to go. And she manages to get in. You see all these Germans waving American flags. They're playing like the national anthem and stuff. March, meanwhile, makes a call to his ex-wife to get her out of the house. He comes in, asks his son, do you still want to go to America? Well, yes. Well, then we have to go right now. We have to go right now. Pack some things, and we're going right now. Okay. But you can tell the little boy is a little upset. He's a little disturbed. So Charlie's making her way through the crowd. The Gestapo is hot on her tail. And then we get this scene with the little boy pondering a telephone. He's thinking about calling and informing on his father. Okay, we're going to find out precisely why in a moment. Well, Hitler's motorcade arrives. The Gestapo are scanning the crowd. And then the president's motorcade arrives. And Charlie finally finds Walter Elliott. She shows him the evidence. And he's like, oh my God, you have to help me. We have to get this to, the ambassador. Well, Elliott had an interview with him. He kind of knows him. All right. So as they're moving towards a place where they can maybe intercept the president's car, the Gestapo man spots her, and you get a chase. And then at this point is when March discovers that his son did make the call. The Gestapo told him that his father was sick, and they just wanted to help him. You have to tell us if you see him. And he's like, they lie. He's trying to get this through to his son. You can't trust these people. And then he hears wheels screech outside. So he makes a run for it outdoors. And the boy, looking from the window, sees his father be shot in the street. You see rain coming down. Now this is different from the ending in the book, but we're not going to get into that. We're going to just focus on this. Well, March manages to kill one of the Gestapo men, and then he flees the scene on a bicycle. He is clearly in pain. It's a palpable wound. It's not just like a little flesh wound. Kennedy's motorcade arrives. The band begins playing the national anthem again. Charlie and Walter push through the throng, the Gestapo right behind them. There are soldiers in the way, but the car at this point stops. The ambassador gets out of the car, and Walter bursts through the line, runs up to the ambassador, hands him the file, shows him photos. Mr. Ambassador, you've got to look at this. And he does. He gets back in the car, shows the president. You see, it's kind of flashes of this and that and the other, and they're looking, and you see the president just like absolutely stunned at what he's seeing. And his car speeds away. And Hitler is standing on this podium. He witnesses all of this. He knows what it means. This is a more definitive ending that you get in the book. I'll say that. The book's ending is probably more realistic. But this is a good ending, I think, for the film. I think it works in the context of a film. Of course, they announce that for security reasons, the president has had to leave. So immediately they're into lying mode, as they always are. And we now see Charlie rushing through the rain, getting to the park. She sits at the table where she and March had once met, and she waits. And Marsh is struggling to get to her, but he cannot. He falls. He crawls into a phone booth, calls his son, assures him it was not his fault. But he says, don't believe them. You've got to think for yourself. You've got to grow your own wings. That's a reference back to the story he had told him earlier. And those are the last words that he says to his son as he slumps dead in the phone booth. So I think it's a pretty powerful ending, and it's more of a personal ending than I think you really got in the book. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say that, but anyway, read the book, watch the movie. But we see then the boy hanging up the phone, And the TV has the rally on. There's Hitler at his podium. And the boy turns off the TV. So it's kind of showing you the idea of people discovering what it's all about and turning away. And we see Charlie still waiting in the rain. And then we get a voiceover. Okay. It's Marsh's son. This is Marsh's son as an adult. So maybe this is coming from 1994 now. He used to wonder why she didn't get out when she had the chance. But she and his father, were the first to see those images of horror, the first to know. And that somehow linked them forever with each other and the victims. So she sat until the Gestapo came for her. She would not leave without March. Without the American alliance, Hitler's Reich collapsed. Of course, there are those who say it never happened. Those who look and do not see. The years after have been difficult, but my father would be proud that at least we no longer live in the house of the blind. And that is the end. Okay. Let's take the spoiler sign down. So, it's very well done. It's well shot. It's well acted. I think it's well written. Again, obviously, the author didn't like changes that were made. I totally get that. I think if you take the book on its own, the movie on its own, they're both very good and they're both worth delving into. And given some of the things that are going on now, not only in the United States, but worldwide, maybe an important thing to see. Again, there are those who say it never happened. There are those who look and do not see. Something to think about. Excellent, excellent film. I discovered it back in the 90s, and I believe I saw the film first, and then I read the book. But both worth looking into. I think you'll enjoy them. If you're into alternate history, sure. But, I mean, it's a powerful story that is very well told. Well, if you've seen Fatherland or read it, let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Maybe think of subscribing to the channel, sharing with a friend. That would be very cool. Helps my little channel grow. But until next time, God bless everybody. Please be kind to one another. Have a little bit of fun out there. And I will see you again soon in Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Bye-bye.